Season 3 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Carl Haley and Daniel Murphy. We're sitting here because we got in touch after I wrote an essay on your podcast for Podthought, the podcast essay column I do for MaximumFun.org. And you said to me, I think you take me more seriously than I take myself. So how seriously do you take yourself?
I go by a kind of a motto of take your work seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. Mm-hmm. And so I feel, and especially you've heard episodes of my podcast, I should probably ask you that. I mean, I feel like I definitely don't take myself seriously when you hear like I'm making jokes where almost all of the jokes on my show are at my own expense. Mm-hmm. So I think that right there kind of pinpoints where my humor lies. But I do take the show seriously. I take seriously other aspects of the show. For example, the idea that the shows does have an agenda to promote other shows like your show. Mm. So just because it's always been important to me to support alt culture. And by alt culture, I mean, I think that for the most part, consumers are lazy when it comes to this choosing music, choosing movies, choosing even down to food and or podcasts. Mm. So I once even had a campaign in an early episode of the show to let's do something to support the smaller podcasts. I declared war on the top 5 comedy podcasts because I thought, here they are, the top 5. They're always in the top 5. It would be as if, and this was actually a plea to iTunes to change the way that they rank and or rotate in new podcasts. It would be as if you went to the movie theater and the same movies were playing at the movie theater 2 years in a row. Mm. Think about that.
No change.
No change. So it's like, oh, I guess there's new episodes of these movies, but it's the same movies. It's the same movies. It's the same movies. It's the same movies.
A new episode of Jaws out.
Yes, a new episode of Jaws. Yeah, so with regard to iTunes and how they rank and rotate in their top podcasts, my plea to them was, please take some of the ones at the bottom, flip it for a day. I actively, because I'm not a normal consumer, I actively seek out bands that are not the ones that people would normally be into, or movies, that are more difficult to discover. That was a hidden agenda, not so hidden agenda of mine when I was on Attack of the Show, and I was, it was logical. Let's cover the major releases that are out on DVD this week. Simultaneously, I would always leak in some sort of reference to, this is something I recommend that you wouldn't know about if you weren't watching this show, which to me was value. And I feel like I've done that my entire career, is look beyond the sort of mainstream choice in front of you, and there are other choices out there, and I'm just a conduit to discover those. Mm. And again, I'm doing the thing that I freaking hate that I do, which is I talk too much.
Well, that's okay, because, we've given the audience a substantial chunk to digest, and now I'll tell them they're listening to Notebook on Cities and Culture. I'm Colin Marshall, coming to you from Glassell Park, Los Angeles, speaking with Chris Gore, who founded Film Threat magazine, who's talked about movies on television shows, from The X Show to the new movie show with Chris Gore to most recently G4's Attack of the Show. He does, of course, the podcast we've been talking about, PodCRASH, with That Chris Gore, which is a podcast made of his appearances on other people's podcast, and he's of course written the books including the complete DVD book. He's done the ultimate guide to
Ultimate Film Festival Survival
Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide. I was going to say festival going survival guide.
Close it up.
And he's done the 50 greatest movies never made.
I can't believe you've got my Wikipedia. It's like, the thing is, for the audience, you're just quoting this off the top of your head. You don't have like an iPad in front of you. You don't have printed notes. So bravo to you, sir. Colin, brilliant job.
Golf clap. How was it editing Videogames magazine, by the way?
Oh my God, you really delved deep into my. Is that even on my wiki? That's bizarre.
I don't know. How was it? How was it though? It was a hot time in video games, wasn't it? The mid-90s.
This was the mid-90s, and I was doing Film Threat magazine for Larry Flynt, because I began working for Larry Flynt as a writer on Hustler magazine. I wrote comedy and humor for Larry, and then I sold him Film Threat magazine, and then I'd hang out with the guys from Videogames magazine because they had a full stand-up arcade machine in their offices, and I was better at video games than these guys.
Playing like an NBA Jam against them or something?
It was like everything was like a Neo Geo machine.
Oh, sure.
So it was like Super Sliders, which is a soccer game.
Legend of Success Joe? Metal Slug?
World of Heroes.
World of Heroes. Oh,
yeah, all those Neo Geo games. So I was just really good at the games, and I'd be like, hey, thanks for letting me play games, guys. I got to get back to work. And then I was offered the position to be the editor of Videogames magazine, and I did that. And, I just wanted to make it interesting to me and sort of leak some irreverent stuff into it. I did get in a bit of trouble once I wrote an editorial explaining. Oh God, this is a long story. Are we going to get into this? Daniel Lungren, who was Attorney General of the state of California at the time, had sent out a letter to the video game industry, basically warning that if you don't begin to curb the violence in video games, if you don't begin to police yourselves, we have the option to police you. It was a warning letter to the industry. It was frightening, frankly. And I explained to him,
Soviet.
Yeah, and I explained to him via an editorial in my magazine, which was illustrated by a finishing move for Mortal Kombat, in which Daniel Lundgren's head was head was placed onto a bloody spine.
As was the style of the time.
Yes, as was the style of the time. And I wrote this editorial about explaining that you don't really understand video games, that violence in video games can't be traced to violent acts in real life. In fact, if you actually did a real scientific study, you'd find that the Bible to be a more dangerous document than a video game. And I explained that think of fighting video games as a form of high-speed chess. Chess, you need to anticipate the opponent's move three moves ahead before you make your own moves. So you're on the defense and offense constantly. And I tried to draw the analogy between button mashing. The people that are button mashers, they don't succeed at video games. The people who are strategic and really thoughtfully think it through and have fast fingers do well. So unbeknownst to me, I began receiving a bunch of phone calls after this editorial came out from people from the New York Times, people from major newspapers across the country saying, so what's your comment about Daniel Lundgren's response to you? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what I'm responding to. He responded to my editorial in the magazine with a letter that he faxed to 300 media outlets before I'd received a copy of it. He did not send it to me. He sent it to me by normal post. So I received it. He spent a stamp, which I actually think at the time faxing was expensive.
We're talking 1993 for those born in 1993 listening.
93, 94, like right around there. So in any case, it ended up. So I responded to what he said. He basically responded to my editorial, and then I actually grew some respect for him because he actually came to the offices of Videogames magazine. They sent in that's a train, by the way. We should definitely know. We're in Glassell Park, but the train goes by about every 10 minutes.
Right.
So
I wrote it here. It got me here. I'll grant it that.
Yeah, exactly. No, it'll be a running theme, and it'll be running outside my door. But so I do respect the fact that he actually came to the Video Game magazine's offices, and we demoed for him some games. It was funny though, having the Attorney General of the state of California come up. They sent an advance team. They had security at every door. So God. His path, it was really kind of scary. Wow, I know you're just the Attorney General, but come on,
right.
You need this many people, and we were very I respect the fact he came out. He spent a half an hour. We took pictures. He didn't have any big publicity behind it. We just wanted to show him, here's what games are. Here's, he expressed his point of view, which is, I think that this affects kids adversely. And I said, well, it's more of a parenting issue. Mm-hmm. If you're parenting by just turning on a screen, that's not parenting. Mm-hmm. And it was a productive conversation. And again, I've talked too much. Colin, I would ask you, what compelled you to write the story? Because I had an interesting thing. I read your story, and that's why we're sitting here. Is you wrote, I thought, a very thoughtful piece about the show that confused my producer of the show, Sean Merrick.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask him directly if he was here, but he's not. This is, listeners, if you don't not familiar, I do a podcast essay column for MaximumFun.org, which is Jesse Thorne's operation. He does a lot of podcasts as well. Reviewing, they're not exactly reviews, but they're about a new podcast each week, and I wrote about Chris Gore's podcast, PodCRASH, and what confused your producer, I guess, about these 5 paragraphs.
Well, he very simple-mindedly looked at it and said, I can't tell if he likes the show. So perhaps could you respond to Sean and explain to him? I thought it was a very thoughtful piece that brought in a question. I mean, some of the flaws of my show, but you were so very polite about it. I thought too polite.
You are your own biggest critic, it seems.
I think that goes with sort of low self-esteem issues, and some people misconstrue that as being bitter. It's like, no, I'm very realistic about what my station is in things. I'm struggling like anybody else to try and be successful in what I'm doing. I guess I've always associated success with financial success, and that's something that is oddly eluded me. But
you're in a cool damn place in here, though, this live work space, I will say. I mean, it's more than what I have. I'll tell you that right now.
Thank you. It's also serves as an office because luckily, because it's zoned commercial, I can write 75% of the total rent off on my taxes. So it ends up being like I'm paying almost half as much in a sense.
I got to move to a commercial zone of Koreatown. Oh my God.
Well, yeah. I mean, you work out of your place, right? So that's a consideration for you.
Yes.
Do you have someone who does your taxes for you that's smarter than you? Because I'm not that smart. I always have someone else do it.
I was like, well, I'll get that when I turn 30, but I'm coming up on it. So I mean, there's the moment will come, but to get smart about that kind of thing. But I'll ask you this, with the issue of liking and disliking, you've been talking about movies and comics and culture for. Can
I stop you for a second? Could you respond to Sean?
This is it's coming
up. Good. Yeah, this is because he was just confused. I think it was just because it's a simple. I think we live in a culture, to explain probably why he got confused. We live in a culture where we've simplified things down to thumbs up, thumbs down.
Right.
5 stars, 0 stars.
And I should note the late Roger Ebert, best known for the thumbs, hated them.
Yeah, he hated them as well. And there's a scale. It's like 2 thumbs way up. Too big. I mean, like he has a whole thing and he hated it as well. I always despised it. I did a 1 through 10 rating system when forced to on Film Threat. With Film Threat magazine, we did 1 through 10. When we did the webs, we did 1 through 10 in the magazine, then we did 5 stars. It was like, well, it's 4 stars is the thing. Well, 4 stars doesn't give me a range. At least I have 5 stars. I've got, 4.5, 3.5. You've got more of a broad range because I really want to be a cheerleader for indie film, at least at the time that I was doing it, and that was the vision for Film Threat. I think indie film has evolved now. I don't know what the industry is definitely going through a weird phase where it's like you've got a lot of studios borrowing ideas from indie film and whatnot. But I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your statement again. Oh my God!
It's partly a question because I say you've spent so long in your career talking about movies and comics and evaluating these artifacts of culture. As well as I do, that the interesting thing to say about any of that stuff is never, I like it or I don't like it. It's never like, yeah or no. It's always something other than your gut reaction, right?
For me, yes. And also it's something like with certain movies, I'm not sure. I just watched Blade Runner last night.
Always a worthwhile pursuit to my mind.
Yeah. And one of those things I recall as I was watching it, that I wasn't sure if I liked it when I first saw it. I mean, I saw it as a kid. I was a teenager and saw it in the theater. And of course, this is, come on, this is Han Solo, he's Han Solo. He's Indiana Jones. It's Blade Runner. And it was such a strange, I wasn't sure how I should feel at the end. Right. I mean, and so that's how I remember when I first saw the movie. I mean, now I see it and I'm thinking it's beautiful. It's one of the most artfully made science fiction films ever, and it's endured to today as something that's worthwhile, whereas Krull, which came out around the same period, and Black Hole, not so much. I remember those films, and I think there's sort of interesting kitsch from the 80s, but those movies don't have the same kind of impact because, I mean, they're real. I mean, Krull is a fantasy, and Black Hole is just like a bad holdover from the it's like a holdover from the way Disney used to make movies in the 50s. It felt like it was out of time, not in a good timeless sense, but in a almost Mad Men sense. Like it was trying to they were trying to make a 50s Disney adventure movie in space and trying to rip off too many aspects of George Lucas's Star Wars. But Blade Runner, like to today, it's funny because you look at it today and you think, wow, that is Los Angeles now, with the exception of flying cars. A lot of the stuff that's in there, and replicants, although there are, you can get by full animatronic fuck dolls, right? They make them.
Oh, the air dolls. We were just
what do they call those? Love dolls?
We were speaking about Japanese innovations in lap pillows shaped like laps and whatnot. But yes, they're very far along in that regard as well.
Yeah, they are. They are. So, so I feel like it's a flawed scale, and also your impression of a movie can change. A movie that you didn't like at a certain stage of life, you can love later, or a movie you loved when you were a kid, and then you see it later and you think, oh my God, that's a piece of shit. Seriously. So you have that kind of reversal. It's a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your taste, and it's a reflection of a stage of life. Whether you see a movie, you may not be ready to see certain movies,
Blade Runner leaves us not knowing how to feel, and I think of other movies you've mentioned liking. Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master recently doesn't leave us knowing how to feel, and I think we respect both of those movies for that. The respect took a longer time to come for Blade Runner, and it's taking a little longer than maybe for some movies for The Master, but it will come. And I think it's the same for anything, for an essay, for a podcast, for a comic book. The ones you like in the long term don't tell you, hey, you should love PodCRASH because I do, and hey, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like they don't answer everything for you. They don't lead you to and here's how you're supposed to feel. Yes. Boop, the button.
The violins tell you.
Yeah, the violins. Yeah, the music sort of dictating your emotions is irritating. But yeah, and so many movies do that now. Mainstream it's hard for a film to come out now that can have ambiguous feelings. And you're right about The Master. I mean, that one is. It's one of those also that it leaves you feeling like you don't know how to feel, right. Which I think is which means I think it really touched something probably uncomfortable in a way that makes me want to revisit films that are like that. That would be a great list of movies where because I love those things on Netflix, when they go they really break it down to these movies that you don't know how you should feel about it, that have women dressed as wasps. What?
Yeah. I got to cerebral British torture genius independent dramas one time, and I was like, well, let's go for it.
I love that. I love that about Netflix, which I was so surprised when that whole thing went down with Netflix changing their pricing structure and going streaming. I'm thinking all I thought to myself when this was blowing up on the internet with people complaining about the pricing was, do you realize what you pay? You pay basically what it costs to go to one movie to watch hundreds of hours of movies. It's ridiculous. If you watched one streaming movie a month, or two, let's say two now, streaming movies a month on Netflix, it's still a better value than your VOD purchase. So that really, I feel that was, that must have been some sort of attack by Netflix competitors trying to see if they were vulnerable. But I love their initiative now to do original programming. We've got the Eli Roth series coming out soon. It may have already started. There's the, House of Cards, which I thought was brilliant. Yes. Which has now spawned for me, a new phrase that I tell friends. A friend will be having an issue at work, and I got some obstacle in front of them, and I'll say, "You got a House of Cards that shit." You have to House of Cards that shit because the whole thing is that the beginning of it, he gets, Kevin Spacey's character gets screwed out of being Secretary of State by the new president. And is so angered by this, he sets in motion a series of events that will lead to his, I don't want to say revenge, but his comeuppance. And it's amazing. It leaves you wanting more too. Although I keep hearing, and this is typical, the British series was much better. You should watch it's like, I'll watch it. I'll watch the British series, but the Spacey one was amazing. So. You got a House of Cards that shit.
Now, I have been aware of your work for, I guess, quite some time, at least in terms of my own cultural awareness of stuff. I think
thank you for that, by the way.
For being aware of you.
Just being aware of me. I appreciate it. It shows that we're like-minded, you know.
When someone has a presence in your consciousness because they showed up on FX one night, and I was
sorry about that.
Well,
that was my first TV experience. I really didn't know what I was doing.
Well, I'm not saying you didn't seem like you knew what you were doing, but
I'm telling you, I didn't know what I was doing.
In the year 2000, nowadays I haven't watched an actual television channel that you like turn on in a while. I think a lot of people haven't because of Netflix. I mean, to name one example.
Well, with G4 turning over into Esquire TV, boy, that makes a lot of sense because those audiences perfectly cross over.
Best of luck to all involved.
It's funny too because G4 just changed their Twitter, their official Twitter account now changed to Esquire. It makes no sense. Makes no sense to me. I'm not sure if that will succeed. Also irrelevant.
Great moments in media consolidation of the 21st century. But in the year 2000, when I was in high school, I did watch a lot of television, specifically a lot of what would then be considered deep cable, like FX, Fox Extended, television made fresh daily, where I would watch, Kevin Smith's Clerks almost unedited at 11 o'clock at night.
And what was great about that was how they changed the swearing.
Yeah.
That and Mallrats. I think Mallrats was the biggest one, where like the Mallrats version that played on FX is so funny because they take like, and I love those. I feel like if the and wasn't Kevin Smith was involved in that, like, hey, you're flipping. I mean, there's just like the way that they'll swear.
Right.
I love it.
It's that itself was its own form of amusement. The editing of the supposed this is less edited than the other, and what you'll see on ABC or whatever. So right. I guess I enjoyed that. But I would see you pop up on. I don't know if I watched the X show, but I knew you were on it, or your new movie show with Chris Gore. I got the sense that these shows on a network like FX, there was some pirate ship sense to them. Like, we might not have much of a budget, but we can do more. We have more freedom than they do on the big three. Let's do something kind of fun, like the podcasting of its day, almost.
In a way, yeah. I mean, wow, you really hit the nail on the head. For me, I really didn't know what I was doing. I was learning to read teleprompter, which then I found out was incredibly easy. Can I teach you?
Yes, I would. This will come up. Maybe.
Colin, once you start doing television, because first of all, listeners, Colin's a good-looking guy. He's got a square jaw. As someone who, if photographed incorrectly, I can look like I have a double chin.
We've all got bad angles.
Yes, well, I have many. I will do a bad angle off with you.
How do I read a teleprompter?
Really, but I'm just saying that you're a good-looking guy and you're young, and you're I don't know, you're like late 20s, but you could pass
28.
But you could pass for 22.
All right.
Easily. You probably, if you were on television, you could probably play high school.
Oh boy, every one of those high school guys with its hairline is a little too far back. Yeah. Just a little too far back to be high school, but I'll use my charm to get through it.
But really simple. You read and pretend you're not reading.
Oh, I see. You just you put on the manner of just talking at a bar or something.
You could throw me some copy and I would be reading it as if I was talking to you. It's just sort of a mindset of, and for me I was lucky because I wrote the stuff that I was reading on teleprompter. The teleprompter was just sort of a reference for me to follow, and I would go on and off script. But all of my jokes had to be vetted by the Fox attorneys.
Oh, I see. So when you had a riff on Battlefield Earth, you had to put that past Suits.
Yes, absolutely. And I had to have meetings. It was interesting because it was weird what I found out I could get away with. Like, for example, on G4, I had a really great standards and practices guy, and he told me, I would swear in ASL, American Sign Language. You can't see this right now on a podcast, but I'm holding my fingers up like I'm doing devil horns,
and then I'm Dio thing,
and I'm making a motion with my fingers below that.
Grabbing below the horns.
It's a grabbing below the horns, and that is in American Sign Language. That is the bullshit.
Ooh.
And so I would say that routinely. They would come to me, and I would figure out what certain things were in ASL. Which was fun. I had a girlfriend once where we would just we would speak in ASL when we were on planes just to fuck with people. So I could swear in ASL and get away with it, and then I could mispronounce swear words. So I would say, well, that guy is a real shatheed.
Yes, shatheed.
Shatheed.
I like that one.
So that was a fun thing. So I was constantly looking for ways to get around those standards and practices people.
Was there a sense that even with the standards and practices guys looking down, that the higher ups aren't really looking too closely at FX. Like we can do things because the pressure is not on channel 42.
At that time, yes. I mean, I think now the channel's evolved. That was mostly reality programming, and FX doesn't do as much reality. I think there's more money in serialized drama or serialized comedy, but serialized shows of any type.
Right.
Because it has value beyond, I mean, the problem with shows like X Show or Attack of the Show or anything that is a commentary on pop culture is how much shelf time is that valid? I mean, are you going to be listening to my Battlefield Earth review from, the late 90s? Or
people might need to know how that movie is.
Yeah, I guess, but I'm just not sure how much the commentary has value. What I've attempted to evolve my career into is more performer, more entertainer, and more comedy, because I think that has value. I mean, people will. And it's interesting, I've sort of struggled to redefine myself from film critic, which is what I was, which is a job that I see as a job just being eliminated along with many other types of jobs in our digital revolution.
But creating more interesting positions than film critic. I mean, if you were Roger Ebert, that's one thing. But if you were at the wherever Daily Star...
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I never wanted to be a film critic. I started Film Threat magazine. I wanted to make movies. And then that just sort of derailed into having kids at a young age. And
you do have a fine collection of 8mm and Super 8mm cameras there.
Yes, that's true. Those were obtained from many swap meets in this area. And now what's funny is I would buy them for like $2, $3. I see now and they're like $50, $60.
Yes, they're in vogue again.
Yeah, they're back. So yeah, there's my collection there. I just think that job is kind of going away. I mean, it's really sort of the mass consciousness, the mass, you look at Twitter and you can see a Twitter feed of comments, and that gives you a sense of what people are thinking about a movie. And that's probably has more value. I like when there are writers out there that will actually add insight.
Right.
I was explaining to a girl recently where I would keep track of, a couple things. I would keep track of places in movies where people went to the bathroom, which their whole website's dedicated to this. More than any other person in movies, Tom Hanks has urinated more in his films than any other actor.
Not the name I would have necessarily guessed right away.
Well, it's a plot point in The Green Mile because he has a urinary tract infection. Right. He goes to pee in Castaway. There's another movie where he's seen peeing. I mean, it's a weird thing where urination comes up via Tom Hanks. Another thing I was pointing out is ways in which fetish culture has leaked into mainstream. And I watched Planet of the Apes with this girl, the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston, and showed her this sort of bizarre fetish stuff. People aren't just tied up in that movie. They're tied up in contorted and bizarre ways that one would only see in, say, Marquis de Sade fiction, And then there's an amazing thing that I didn't even notice at the end when Dr. Zaius is tied up. Charlton Heston has this great line about, you humiliated me and I'm humiliating you. And, fetish culture is a lot about humiliation. So it was just a very bizarre, like, oh my gosh, well, this is because the way he's led around in a collar and a leash, a leather leash. I mean, if you read the script, let's say you just read the script, it's like, okay, but it's one thing to explain these actions, right? But the way that those actions are executed in the movie, they're done in a way that is right out of fetish culture. And then he's stripped naked in front of this jury of apes and made to stand there humiliated, naked in front of them as he's being judged. It's a weird, eyes wide shut-ish kind of thing. When you look at it from that perspective, and I once hired a dominatrix actually to review Planet of the Apes in Film Threat magazine. This is back in the printed days.
Yes.
So I prefer and love when someone who writes about film writes about it in a way to add insight and perspective rather than to tell me whether or not I should like it. I think that that's useful to a point, but I can get that information on Twitter. Now give me something I can't get via the mass consciousness.
Do you think this answers your producer's question at all about what I wrote?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I think what I'll do is I'll read it to Sean, and I'll explain to him what it means. But no, I got it immediately, and I was very touched that you would spend that much time writing about my show, and so I appreciate it.
Well, no problem. And by the way, you are not the only person from Big Rapids to be on this program. What's the demonym there? Big Rapidsian? Big Rapidsite?
Oh no, I'm really from Royal Oak, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's where I grew up. But Royal Oak, the Royal Oak area. But I'm definitely a Michigander for sure.
Okay, you're not from Big Rapids. Somebody's got something wrong on the internet.
Oh no. Well, that may be where I was born, but it's not where I consider myself from. My parents were in college at the time I was born. But yeah, so I guess I was born there, but not. I mean,
from the greater Big Rapids area.
I was probably there for my first year of life, so I don't remember any of it. But it's really like Royal Oak, Michigan is where, I mean, that's where I grew up, went to, school and whatnot. So high school and.
My question stands though. How did you get into what we've called the alternative culture in that part of the country?
I can tell you exactly. A video store called Thomas Video. Which when I was a kid, and I'm talking about single-digit aged kid, I was like, 7, 8 years old. I got a movie camera and I got a movie projector, and I convinced my mother to allow me to. We had a laundry chute that went down into the basement, and the laundry chute was separated by a drywall wall into the laundry room, and then there was another room that was sort of this private room off the. In the basement had like 3 rooms. Nice. So I thought, oh gosh, if I cut a hole here, I could put my projector in there and then run a cable with a speaker, and I could show my friends movies. So this is at the time there was a place called Thomas Film Classics, and they sold Super 8 movies, which were condensed versions of Super 8 movies. In fact, I still have The Empire Strikes Back on 2, I think 800-foot Super 8 sound reels.
Condensed.
But they would condense the plot of the movie. So I had like Logan's Run. I had films like Silent Running. And they would basically just give you the highlights of the movie. It would be in highlighted form. You could get them in black and white silent. You could get them in color sound. So I had I believe it was an Elmo projector or a UMIG. I had all different types of. I think I had
one of the big two, Elmo or UMIG.
Elmo, UMIG, and there was of course Bell and Howell, but I thought Bell and Howells were pieces of shit. Anyways, so I convinced my mother to cut a hole in the drywall, and then had the projector in one room where I would then turn it on, and then the speaker wire. So I had a movie theater in my house at a young age, and that was exciting. And I would go to this place called Thomas Film Classics. Eventually, Super 8 went away, and then Laserdisc. It was VHS. And Beta, and then it was, of course, Laserdisc, and the store evolved into Thomas Video, which was run by 2 guys named Jim Olensky and Gary Reichel, and I really hold them and my mother responsible for my eclectic taste in movies, because my mom would always say things like, "Don't go to the mall, don't go to the mall theater and see those stupid. You got to go to the DIA, which was the Detroit Institute of Arts, or you had to go to the Maple." I mean, here's my mom, like, I'm in college. She's like, "Go see this movie, Sex, Lies, and Videotape." This is great.
She was tapped in for some reason. She
was tapped in. And then I worked at Thomas Video. I lied about my age. And I said I was, 18 when I was actually 16. And the reason that I had to be over 18 is because they had porn there.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't much care about the porn, but the idea that I could, and this is weird also, like all that encouragement from my mother, and then also just hanging out at this movie store. Once a week I would go to this movie store. I discovered a movie theater called the Punch and Judy Theater. The Punch and Judy played, retrospectives, screenings of movies like James Dean's East of Eden. And I remember a John Waters Film Festival, and I was like, well, who's this John Waters? I saw Pink Flamingos on the big screen when I was a kid, and it destroyed me. It really, really was troublesome. I was 16 years old, and I found it disturbed me, not because of the events in it, but I thought, how could people think that way and make movies like this? This is bizarre. Then when I worked at the video store, I ended up discovering all of John Waters' movies. Right. So it was really a combination of my mom and, encouragement. Also, I mean, my dad was a big movie buff. So it was really my family and then the guys from Thomas Video. That's, again, a long-winded answer. How did you get interested in alt culture everything? our tribe, the tribe of people that are interested in things that are alternate, or just not the choices that are the ones at the very top of the menu, the specials of the day.
Right.
How did you get into that?
Well, it's not that different from you, I don't think, because it was film. I was growing up in Seattle, where there's a more robust revival cinema scene than you might expect. Landmark has a lot of theaters there, and in those days they were often bringing films from countries I didn't usually see films from, and older stuff. Seeing a movie that wasn't brand new in a theater was, at 14, very exciting to me. It sounds like
tell me about one of those movies.
Like, sometimes, let me think of the most mainstream one I can, and it'll be relatable. Mad Max. Seeing Mad Max in a theater, like
the original Mad Max.
Yeah, the first one, which I guess is less mainstream, come to think of it, than some movies. But seeing the first Mad Max in a theater, I was like, this is possible. Then seeing what else is mainstream? Kubrick, a good.
Why do you have to say mainstream? It doesn't have to be mainstream.
Well,
anything.
Because I'm using the most mainstream example, because when you're a teenager, you don't want to say you were. I was watching Jacques Rivette only at age 14. You don't know. I know. I want to use.
What's wrong with that? I think that's amazing.
I want to use examples here. I want to use So I remember one date.
Forget relatable examples. What is the most obscure thing that you think you saw?
Well, I'll finish this sentence. I remember a date I was on at 14 or 15 that was a double bill of The Shining and A Clockwork Orange at the Varsity in Seattle. So that's the kind of kid I was, I suppose.
A date?
Yeah, a date.
A date? Because when I think Clockwork Orange, and when I think the movie Singing in the Rain, I'm thinking rape. I'm thinking rape. I can't listen to the song Singing in the Rain without thinking rape.
Yeah, that overwrites it to some extent for me as well as for her.
How did you do on the date?
It was fine. 3-year relationship out of it.
Oh, wow.
But,
and also because women, for some reason, are really turned on by that movie. I don't know a woman out there that hasn't seen Clockwork Orange that doesn't think like that they were not turned on by that film. There's something about Malcolm McDowell's very compelling, and of course he has a threesome in it. He has, there's multiple rape scenes,
right.
And for some reason, a lot of women are turned on by that film, and that's a whole other argument. And now, I'm sure I've derailed the podcast. I definitely crashed it.
No, because when you're into film, like I was in Seattle or you were in Michigan, in America anyway, Los Angeles becomes part of your consciousness, because you see it in so many movies as a setting or as simply a backdrop, and movies come from there in America. And it eventually became the city that fascinated me the most because I just seen it represented so much and knew what kind of culture came from there. I recall you saying on PodCRASH that you came to Los Angeles when you thought you faced a choice, New York or Los Angeles, and Los Angeles didn't smell like pee and was less expensive, so you came here. Was that the extent of it?
Yes, although I would tell you this, that there are places in Los Angeles that do smell like quite a bit like urine. It was more affordable. It was really, LA was more affordable. The weather, I grew up in a winter environment. I didn't wish to go from one winter environment to another one. I'd suffered through, ice scrapers. I'm sure you know what that is. Yes. You scrape the ice and the frost off of your windshield. I love the winter, and my only issue with winter environments, my only issue with it is it just goes on too long. It goes on way too long. That those months they just seem to crawl by. So, which I think is probably why a lot of people in Michigan are film fanatics, is because you're stuck in this environment. Well, what are we going to do? Well, let's watch a movie, right? Because you don't have, you can't just go outdoors or go, do outdoor activity. Not that I do any outdoor activity. I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. I am not someone who outdoor activity. I'm an indoor kid, which I think explains the fact that an indoor kid who never smoked. So explains the fact that I have very few wrinkles at my age.
The indoor kid lifestyle can be very rough on some. when you pass a certain age, an indoor kid, sometimes they show signs of, they show battle scars. So is it?
Yeah. That's like my vehicle. This is actually one of the bad things about LA is your car will get dents and dings if you park somewhere in LA. And I finally just had to get over it. I've only bought a new car once in my entire existence, a brand new car. And I remember the week I got it, got a little ding on it because I parked too close to some guy and he was opening his door. The guy was not, he wasn't trying to do anything intentionally. Right. And I remember being so upset that, I got a ding. Now I look at that as a way to kind of reprogram my brain. Any ding, scratch, whatever my car, it's battle damage.
Right, exactly.
My car is battle damaged. It's way cooler way of thinking of it than, having to have a perfect car. Speaking of that, I got a scratch on my car, a really bad scratch on the back of my car. Someone scraped it in a parking lot. Typical. All the damage to my car has been like, my car was parked, it was there, it was fine. I come back, there's a scratch.
Right.
That's LA. We all have cars, and some people are good at driving them and some are not.
I don't have one.
Oh, well, I love being somewhere where I don't need to have a car. Yeah. I would love to not have to have a car. I think it's a better way to live. Anyways, so I took there's this scrape on the back of my car in order to get rid of the scrape, because I had people coming up to me going like, "Hey man, I can fix that. Like for $400, I'll fix it for you." And I'm like, $400? Forget that. So I found on Etsy that you could buy a vinyl bats that you could put on your wall as like a design. Right. And I thought, well, will those go on cars? So I bought 2 sets of vinyl bats, one swarm going one way and one swarm going the other way. And I just put them on the rear quarter panels of my car, and it looks badass. Instead of flames off the back wheel, I've got a swarm of bats. I am a Batman fan. You're in my place.
Yes, there's a bat on the number above the number of your place. When I was looking, I went toward the bat.
Yes, so that's how. See, I figured people would find it that way. It's that and the dog bowl outside my door, even though I don't have a dog. But I, there's obviously, you'll see I've got like a big Batman collection of stuff that I've obtained through the years. Some of it I bought, but mostly gifts actually from friends. I'm easy to buy for. Batman, Star Wars, or porn, any of those will hit.
Which brings me to this question: is how much do you see yourself in film culture as opposed to, I guess, nerd culture, if you like? On your first episode of PodCRASH, you say how much of a nerd you are. And I don't know if liking Batman puts you in nerd culture, but it seems like that's the culture of enthusiasts, but it's separate from film. There are Batman movies, but you're in 2 worlds. Does that make sense? I think
it's possible to be in the Venn diagram of ourselves, the makeup of who we are, to be multiple things. I think it depends also. I think the word nerd has been redefined to the point where I don't like to use that word anymore. I hate that word. Right. I prefer the word geek. So I'm just not a fan of the nerd word because I feel it's been co-opted by the mainstream. And I mean, I grew up as a kid who was physically inferior to other kids. I was ridiculed and picked on. I was probably called faggot 10 million times in high school. Right. Okay. And
that was the kind of school you went to.
Hey, it's Michigan, and I feel that I think it's a good thing that, State of California has zero tolerance policy when it comes to bullying, even though there's still bullying. I think maybe the pendulum swung a little too much one way where we're being overly sensitive to bullying, where I feel like there's a difference between bullying and competitiveness. Right. There were plenty of jocks that were nice to me, as well as there were jocks that were jerks and were abusive. And I definitely suffered through that abuse, and it's something that I've had to deal with my kids. Never wanted to beat up a 6-year-old more than when I saw one picking on my son. It's just like, it made you, ugh. But then you can't blame the kids. It's moronic parents. So, I was bullied as a kid and a nerd, but I was also like just enthusiastic about things, and I created what I felt was a protective shield. This is how I survived high school, growing up nerd, geek, whatever you want to call it, that I learned to not give a shit what people think of me. And that became my protective shield, because as soon as I took the power away from them, meaning if I teased you about some aspect of you that was a physical attribute, which I always found to be irritating to me, whether it be race, religion, whatever, anyone being ridiculed for an attribute that they had, I find that loathsome. I find it's to me,
not like something dumb they did, but an attribute.
Something dumb they did. Whatever, it was, intentional, but an attribute, meaning a physical attribute. Like, I had a friend, who was in a wheelchair. Her name was Carmen, and, she was Jewish. And I remember being teased for being her friend. And it's just
mean streets you grew up on, Chris Gore.
Well, just like other like things of like, my friend John Woo in high school, not the filmmaker,
Right.
John Woo, and I've talked about him before, and his name was John Woo, and it still is. And he's Chinese, and I just remember people like saying, well, you're hanging out with John. And I'm like, yeah, John. Yeah, he's funny. And they're like, well, he's Chinese. And I'm just like I didn't notice that it's like, oh, that's a reason that people use to not like people. I think that's stupid. Right. So it would bother me that those classifications are things, because always my ideal was Star Trek. Growing up watching Star Trek as a kid with my dad, was that informed a lot of the way that I look at like things socially. Social justice I have a real affinity for, whether it be gay marriage or whatever. I go very far, liberal on those things. I'm more conservative when it comes to other things, but there's no political party really for me. But those social inequities always bothered me, and I would look to fiction. Science fiction to me was a great way that those things were dealt with. I forgot what I was talking about at the beginning of this when I went off on my rant. But it was growing up. I grew up a legitimate nerd who learned to deal with it by not caring what people thought of me, to the point where I remember there was a phase in high school where I saw the movie Quadrophenia by The Who, and I wore one of those big green jackets that they wore in Quadrophenia with like the bullseye on it, which kind of made me a target.
You had to find the thing, first of all, which couldn't have been easy. Army
supply store, you can find it. And I wore the Who shirts and Quadrophenia. And I remember going to see a midnight show, and that movie really spoke to me. And it is a movie that doesn't tell you how to feel at the end. And it has sort of shocking full frontal male nudity and this sort of weird, it's this sort of gangly kid that's like picked on, and he has a girlfriend, and then she cheats on him. It's all this like basically everything bad that could happen to a character in a movie. And it's about wanting to potentially commit suicide, and it has a very ambiguous ending. And it was and plus also the great music. That score from The Who is incredible. So that movie really spoke to me. And there was a period where I was wearing that jacket and being called faggot. Yeah. So and just like so much, like that was just the thing where it's just like, I can't, because it is annoying that you're doing this to me. That's nothing I could ever do to someone else. So that really, those experiences growing up nerd really, I mean, a legitimate geek who was socially awkward and just came up with this sort of method was, if I'm not reacting to this, they don't have power. That was my putting up my shields.
Does not caring what anybody thinks of you remain a plank of the Chris Gore media persona today?
I think it's definitely something that has allowed me to flourish in whatever career. I don't want to sound like I've been able to carve a career out of being DIY and self-motivated. I have had jobs. For example, I was hired. My last job was at G4, and that was a job someone hired me to do on a weekly basis. And I need to be a professional and do my work off camera, and then be prepared to be on camera and have notes and know what I'm going to say. And sometimes I have jokes that bomb. A lot of times I have jokes that bomb. But a lot of other projects that, we talked about some of my projects off camera, like those are things I thought of and just said, I'm going to make that. No one hired me to write a book about film festivals. No one hired me to do an animated show called Fetishville. No one hired me to do a comedy album called Celebrities Poop. These are all things that I just thought up and thought would be that maybe someone other than myself would find them entertaining. And so I chose to do those things that I'm doing. So there you are.
Indeed. Many of them upcoming, listeners, in case you want to keep those on your radar, and we'll talk about them more at the very end. But
some of those upcoming, and then there was Film Thread. I mean, I just sort of thought of that. I mean, I could go through, like, when I look at, like, the things that I'm most proud of my career, they're things that I just came up with and just decided to do, rather than things that I was hired to do. That's a different thing. But those are the things at some point I would love to be making a living off of those those sort of projects that are self-generated.
Right. One of your self-generated projects, we've mentioned PodCRASH, your podcast of podcast appearances, and you do that here in Los Angeles, which, if you're going to do a podcast of being a guest on other podcasts, this is the city to do it, right? I mean, this is kind of the world's podcast Mecca, isn't it?
It is. It really is. There's not as many podcasts in New York, they're scattered around the country for sure. Other people are doing them, but LA is, because I think people here are one, so narcissistic. We live in the most narcissistic city on the planet. Maybe Paris is. Maybe they're the parts of France that I would say would be in the running. But LA, I think, is an incredibly narcissistic city. It's also a podcast as a marketing tool for oneself. So it doesn't surprise me that, they say you need headshots. I've never much cared about that, but they say every comedian needs a podcast. And so I wanted to start one that would not pigeonhole me with regard to subject matter, that I could speak on a variety of topics every week, and it would be a different kind of show. I would just be the conduit, and at the same time to get a taste of another show, which I feel terrible that you come in here with a Q&A formatted, you're going to interview me, but let's get to know you.
What did you want to know?
Well, I want to know, like you mentioned Seattle and you grew up a film fan. Is the subject of your podcast mostly film? And you say also you've recorded episodes all over. You've traveled.
It's not mostly film, but I have talked to filmmakers and film people and people about film. It tends to be creators and observers of all kinds in various cities, mostly Los Angeles because I live here, but about the work they do and the cities they do it in. So you'll notice we've talked about Los Angeles as well. I don't know.
But are you using this? Just be completely honest. I'll be honest with you.
Sure.
I started Film Threat mainly as a way to I wanted to have a way to rally against my what I thought about the film industry, but secondly, I really just wanted to meet my heroes.
Oh, sure.
And in the time I did Film Threat, I got to meet people like David Lynch, just so many of the people that I admired, Quentin Tarantino.
Right.
It was just an opportunity for me to meet and an excuse really to relate to and talk to people like Steven Soderbergh, Spike Lee, just people who were my heroes in the world of film, Jim Jarmusch. So are you using this podcast as an excuse to meet your heroes?
Who do you know successful who hasn't had the stage of their career where they found an excuse to meet people? Do you know what I mean? Or to meet people who were engaged with the same type of things they are, but farther along, to meet people up the hierarchy from them. Do you know what I mean? I think everybody has that thing, don't they?
Yes, they do. I'm saying I do. Do you?
I wouldn't say excuse, but it seems like it's
a side benefit.
Well, considering the entire core of the project has always been just me talking to people, I guess it's hard to draw a line between side benefit, excuse for X, Y, or Z, and the entire core of the project. You know what I mean? It's like as if I'm not meeting people, I don't have a show, right?
Right.
So there's that too. But did you conceive of the form of your career as being about you talking to people? I mean, that might be the difference. Or was it just like, I want to work with movies. I want to write about movies, talk about movies, and hey, I might get to meet some cool people as well.
I just wanted to be around movies. Okay. I mean, anything. I mean, it's to me like being around that element in whatever form, I think was a thing that was satisfying. I didn't necessarily want to be behind the scenes, and I have since, having left Film Threat, made films, and currently working on 2 web series. Yeah. And Film Threat certainly afforded the opportunity to meet a lot of my heroes. I have to say, some of them were horrible disappointments. I'm not going to say who. Right. And then a lot of them were just amazing experiences, change your life experience to having met and hung out with people who were my heroes. Now it's a matter of like, I almost see, there are people now I see like, oh, I'd really like to work with that person, or that person is someone like, oh, I'd love to get so-and-so to do a voice for this animated show. Like now I look at it differently. I look at it more professionally of like, okay, this is now a world that I'm embedded in and want to be a part of, and take all this sort of bottled up creativity and express myself in a way that's not it's not interviewing other people. The premise for my show, we were talking about before we started, is horribly flawed because I feel like people have either heard me on other shows or they just don't like the subject matter that week. And this is, I mean, I've told some of these stories before, and some of this stuff is new that talking to you, but you're a great interviewer. Thank you. And you have an amazing voice too.
Thank you, but I couldn't possibly accept all that.
No, you need to take it. I'm telling you, I'm telling you right now that like you definitely have, especially with your voice. I mean, amazing, like take advantage of that.
You think I should somehow get enough money to buy a car doing that or something?
Yes,
get around to that?
at least
a motor vehicle could cost $1,000. How would I scrape that? I say that, but I was just getting a suit made for $1,500 in Koreatown, so my priorities, I guess, are elsewhere.
That is, wow, a $1,500 suit. I think that's,
But they make it there for you, you know? You've got the Korean man tailor taking your measurements.
$1,500?
That's half the price of New York, or let alone London. Koreatown. If you want a suit made, Koreatown. And it helps if you speak a little Korean. I study Korean so I can get a good rapport going with the tailor, and I'm not getting a discount, but they're friendlier.
Wow, $1,500. I think the most I ever spent, once I spent $700 on a leather jacket. That was I remember being ridiculed by my friends, why'd you do that? It's I don't know. I have money. That was at the time.
If it fits well, if it's, it's a fit. Some of my career is writing about menswear, so don't let me go too far. But if the fit is right.
How does menswear pay? Where should I get Men's Warehouse? Is that where I should go?
You should go to someplace, anywhere other than Men's Warehouse.
I feel like those things, if they're doing these cheesy commercials, it's there's got to be a better place. There's got to be a place downtown that's you just go there, that place, and you'll get good clothes. They've got a decent wardrobe. But.
Depending on the grade you're going for. But, I'm telling you, Koreatown tailors, any tailor in Koreatown will do the alterations you need, will make you if you need a blazer, they'll make you that at one place, a suit, another place. I can give you recommendations.
Please.
But now I'm derailing myself here because I wanted.
Okay. I was trying to derail you. I want you, because I want to get a sense of you. There's too much of me on this show.
Well, we can record additional segments when you use this on your show. But I don't want to forget, because you mentioned Quentin Tarantino. We talked about Kevin Smith. You have a poster of Clerks up there. What was it like being in Los Angeles, embedded in the, broadly speaking, world of independent film, in that, now regarded as a golden moment of the 90s in America for, the indie boom, shall we say? Well,
yeah, it's interesting. Filmstrut was around during that boom, but that's actually not a poster from Clerks that you see up there. That's actually a poster from my film, My Big Fat Independent Movie.
Oh, you parodied the Clerks poster?
I parodied the Clerks poster.
That makes much more sense that you have that than a Clerks poster.
Yes. In fact, what I'll do before you leave, I've got these postcards where there were parodies. For My Big Fat Independent Movie, we did these postcards that were parodies of other independent movies.
Oh, excellent.
I'll give you a set of those.
This is what happens when you watch a movie just on a disc. You never see the actual cool stuff you had to make to promote the movie.
Right. Well, I think if you get the 2-disc set of My Big Fat Independent Movie, you get these little collector cards. Which I actually have to buy online. I have to, as I keep, I'll lend it out and then never get it back.
But I wanted to bring up My Big Fat Independent Movie because you lived through this moment in U.S. cinema that a lot of people my age look back on as wow, what happened that went away? Why isn't American indie film still robust?
Well, there are financial reasons for that. There's a lot of, I think there was a whole indie film crash where so much of the content was the same. And I think even when My Big Fat Independent Movie came out, it's that was almost the end of indie film. I feel like when a genre dies, it's because, we were making fun of cliches, which is people are on the road. There's 2 hitmen going to pull a botched robbery. It's indie film doesn't have to just be all that. And it's funny because when we were covering it, those guys were nobodies. I mean, Kevin Smith was a kid who made Clerks and got lucky selling it at Sundance. And Quentin Tarantino was making Reservoir Dogs, which he had originally planned to shoot in Super 8 because he was so frustrated with being a guy working at a video store, just trying to get, writing scripts and trying to get things made. So Film Threat was invited to the set during the making of Reservoir Dogs. So we covered these people when they were nobodies. And now, of course, they're, indie film legends. Right. And so it was a golden moment. I don't know. I feel satisfied in the sense that we were around to support those filmmakers. And I just hope they're nice to me when I see them. Kevin Smith's always nice to me. I haven't seen Quentin in a while.
Why has, and you might not even agree about the premise of this question, but why has only Quentin Tarantino maintained his head of steam from that time?
I will tell a very specific answer to that, because I don't think he makes his choices based on, I think Kevin Smith fits in this category too. Kevin and Quentin, they're not making their choices based on, I want to make a big movie and make a bunch of money. A lot of people will make an indie movie. They'll make an indie movie that gets some acclaim and some notice. They get hired to do a big studio movie, and then they're part of that system. And I feel like both Quentin and Kevin haven't made their choices that way. Quentin has not made a movie for Marvel yet. Although if he did, it would be fucking badass movie. If Quentin Tarantino did a Marvel movie, it'd be amazing. But Quentin has decided, I'm going to make movies that I write. Kevin Smith in that same regard. I mean, they're two vastly different filmmakers, but they've each taken the road of, I'm not making these choices from a commercial standpoint. I'm making it because this content is so close to me personally. And so they've taken a step forward in that regard, and they've DIY'd it. They've decided, like, they could be, and there were always rumors of Quentin doing some big mainstream thing and being handed something to direct. And he hasn't done it. I mean, it's content that he generates. Same thing with Kevin. And I feel that's a different kind of choice. It's not like someone saying to Chris Nolan, okay, do the Batman franchise. And he did an amazing job. I mean, the last film is highly flawed. We could have a conversation. But the path of most indie filmmakers is, I'm making a showcase film to get hired by a studio. And then the studio system, you live or die pretty quickly, and mostly die quickly.
Is there any rhyme or reason to what you're finding exciting in what you're watching now? Even if we just say movie-wise, whether it is a movie a kid made and put on the internet, or whether it is a huge studio release that costs $100 million. Is there a place where exciting movies are coming from for you, or is it just like anywhere? I just got to watch a lot of stuff.
The internet. The internet, when I've seen, I saw a short made by a band where it's effectively a POV shot of a guy. It's like an action movie, but shot POV. So imagine like a first-person view shooter movie, but it's actually live action. That was incredible. I couldn't tell where they made all the cuts, although they had to have made cuts. The best stuff now is online. I mean, I think that's also where lazy, TV executives will look for development of animated shows or other stuff, content that's upcoming, and or studios looking for directors, mostly foreign directors. I'm not kidding, to come over here and make movies because they're just more willing to play. I really feel that's like you're finding a lot of the great stuff online, not so much at film festivals or in indie film. I think the problem is that audiences have been burned too much by indie movies, where it's like, this is just because something has laurels doesn't mean it's genius.
You rung the death knell with your parody.
Exactly. Well, frankly, that was my point of making that film. Blazing Saddles was a film that basically, that was the death knell of Westerns. And the Western was dead. And I feel like a genre is dead when it can be called out via the way of film parody. I think that the film parodies have just become awful, though, because they're just like a parody of whatever is in the zeitgeist.
Like the Spartans?
Yeah, awful. I mean, that particular group that you're talking about, their films are all shit. A lot of the projects I do are like things, I'd love to see this and no one else is going to make it, so I'll make it. But it ends up being flawed because even the problem with my big fat independent movie, which was marginally successful, it did a little better than broke even, financially speaking, but was reamed by the critics at the time, which I knew I was going to get because I'm a former film critic making a movie. I knew I was going to get reamed.
No publicity is bad publicity, I guess.
It was bad, and it might have been bad in this case. It's derailing a film career that I didn't really have as I was attempting to have one. But, I'm making jokes about subtitles. I'm making jokes about, black and white in movies. I'm making jokes about people pointing out, there's like this, hey, what are we doing? We're going to form an unlikely bond, you idiot. We were making fun of things that would only be funny to someone who really knows indie film, which is an audience that would not appreciate a movie that has fart jokes.
Oh, that's the unsolvable dilemma at the core, huh?
I feel like that's where I failed. Let's just this whole interview, just talk about where I fail. That seems to be the running thread, is that I'm a failure and a loser.
Well, let's talk about the things that your fans and my listeners and everybody can get from you next, which includes a comedy album and a picture book about pooping.
Yes, it's called Celebrities Poop, which you can get as either a download. Well, this is not until later in the summer, so this is a ways off. But
stay tuned, listen.
But this year, it's coming out this summer, and it's an exact page-for-page parody of the book Everyone Poops, but with celebrities in it. You can get a physical copy of the book, which will come with a download code for my album, or you can buy the album, which will have a PDF, a digital version of the same book. So that is a project I'm working on. I have 2 animated series coming out, one called The Last Guys on Earth, and the other one called Fetishville. Those are findable via online. And then I'm part of an improv comedy group called Comic Book Live, where we do live, unscripted improv comedy where we take a story or a comic book and we act it out live on stage. And I've played everything from Batman in the Batman Holiday Special. I was in Star Wars. I was C-3PO. We did Star Wars Episode 7. And then we're just about to do a Star Trek show in which I will play Khan from Star Trek 2. And the premise is that, and you'll be able to, there's some videos that surface online for this. Sometimes we post videos, but our next show is actually on April 20th at IO West in Hollywood, 6366 Hollywood Boulevard. You can go to ioimprov.com/west, or you can go to facebook.com/comicbooklive. There's a plug. Do you notice how I got that in there?
That was slick.
I'm playing Khan, and what we're doing is we're showing a video where it's the end of Star Trek 2, except instead of, blowing up the Genesis device, Khan presses this thing, and he goes back in time, and you hear the music from Back to the Future, and it's Khan going back in time to the key moments in Captain Kirk's career and derailing them, like being like a roommate in college. So it's me as Khan saying things like, Kirk, the yogurt in the refrigerator labeled Kirk, I ate your yogurt. I will eat your yogurt. Any yogurt you label Kirk.
I can see the potential in this.
Yeah, so it's Khan going back in time to get his revenge, but in extremely lame ways. And Kirk constantly foiling Khan.
You have a lot to look forward to, listeners, from Chris Gore, who, by the way, is a comedian, man of cinema. You'll know him from The X Show, from the new movie show with Chris Gore, from Attack of the Show on G4, from Film Threat, from PodCRASH, from Videogames magazine, perhaps most of all. Chris, thanks so much.
Colin, thank you so much. You are a great broadcaster. I see an incredible future for you.
Thank you. This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall. You can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. And special thanks to everybody who backed Season 3 on Kickstarter, including Paige Calvert, Jonathan Crow, Douglas Dollars, Paul Doyle, John French, Eric Graham, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Kimberly Hahn, Carl Haley, Stefan Halperin, Matt Howie, Andrew Hovenick, Mark Hines, Andy Cooney, Mark Larson, Matthew Lickey, Mr. Munvirzi, Rob Montz, Lindsay Muniak, Daniel Murphy, Aidan Noman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Blake Riley, Rob Schultz, Cam Smith, Small Demons, Todd Shimoda, Kevin Smokler, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, and Wayne Wright.